So welcome to this month's Elder Care presentation. This presentation is going to talk about, at this presentation, we're going to be talking about care facilities. And so we have Tanya Cox here with us with Christian Care Communities. And I will let her introduce herself a little bit more and talk about her topic.
Okay, perfect. Hopefully everybody can hear me and do that. I wanted to I'm with Christian Care Communities. We are the largest faith-based, not-for-profit service provider for adults. We have a whole host of services, including home and community-based services all the way to residential care. And my background is actually in Alzheimer's disease and dementia care, so kind of bringing all of that. But I also have been a family member, so I can bring all of those perspectives to you as we kind of talk about that. So I'm going to be referencing a resource that I really, really like, and I'm trying to hold it up so I can see it. Yes, no, they're on our slide. It's the Pathways, and it's a resource guide, and I think I heard somebody say it's almost like a phone book for all the resources, but probably the one-stop shop as far as finding elder care services and resources if you're caring for someone or if you were to need those. So I'm going to talk a little bit about it. Some of what I talk about will be in here, and so hopefully that's a good resource. They're going to mail it to you, so if you want it mailed, sign up in the back of the room, and if you're on the Zoom meeting, I think Zeta is sending you an email link where you can request to get a copy mailed to you either to your home or through campus mail. So, but we're going to talk a little bit about when is it time to move your loved one, which is a pretty hard decision. And a lot of times, sometimes we got in our gut, is it time? Do we need to be thinking about that kind of thing? And so I kind of want to just break it down fairly basic, and we can talk about each area. But I think the driving factors as you begin to think about, is it time, is really looking at your loved one, their changing abilities. If they have a particular diagnosis, is that disease progressing? What is happening to them? But also caregiver stress, whether you're the primary caregiver or whether you're supporting the primary caregiver. That stress really can add to that. We're going to talk a little bit more about practical day-to-day issues, as well as the legal issues and the financial issues that all go into making some decisions on the type of care, level of care, and what you need. So let's talk a little bit about as your loved one is changing. And it's looking at things that are somewhat practical, but it's the idea of, can they prepare a meal for themselves? Are they still living alone, and can they get adequate food, meals, things like that, and do it safely? Can we operate a stove, but it's not just a stove because maybe we unhook that because we're having trouble, but it's a microwave, and it's putting something in the microwave and it for too long or it catching on fire. So they can they do that safely and maintain their nutritional status? Housekeeping, can they keep up with the housekeeping? And that can be everything from laundry to vacuuming to dusting to just basic picking up, cleaning the dishes, things like that. Personal hygiene. Are we doing okay with taking a shower, getting dressed, shaving, brushing our teeth, those types of things? Are we doing okay with medication management? We know that for many of our loved ones, they may get confused. It may be hard to keep up with. Even if we put it in a pill planner, even if we make it as simple as possible, sometimes keeping up with, is it the time of day? Did I take it right? Are they getting mixed up? Those types of things. Do they have confusion and memory loss to an extent that it's affecting all of the things that I've listed up there, and making those tasks harder? And would they know what to do if there was something went wrong? Would they know how to call 911? Would they know how to get out of the house? Would they know what to do if the stove caught fire? What would they know how to process through that? Now, there's a lot of things you can do as you look at these questions. So the question then becomes for you is that, are there things we can put in place because it's not too bad, or are the resources we're trying to put in place at home too much, and now we need to look at something a little bit larger? Because with meals, you can look at things like Meals on Wheels, or getting someone to bring in easy to grab foods and then supplementing those by making some things for them. With housekeeping, you have somebody come in and clean the house, right? So a little bit of those things you can really supplement, but sometimes those get bigger than we can do, and we're pretty much kind of bringing in a whole team and a whole staff to take care of everything. And when we're doing that, we begin to look at, okay, does it make more sense to put us in a location where all that's under one roof, and we're getting all of that support. Caregiver stress is one of those things that I think is particularly challenging to identify as a driving factor, but I don't want to ignore it. If you're a caregiver, a primary caregiver, or if you're supporting a primary caregiver, understanding the toll that caregiving can take on you is important. And a lot of times when we're in that caregiving role, we're not thinking about ourselves. We're not always taking the best care of ourselves. We're taking care of the person we love, right? But over time, that stress can really hurt other relationships. It can affect your physical health. It can affect a whole host of things. And what happens is that you can end up too sick to take care of your loved one, because if it's getting to be too much and it's beginning to take that toll. And it also, if you're overly stressed, sometimes your relationship with your loved one begins to be strained. And as you're trying to continue to keep them at home and provide care, you're creating an environment where it's not good, and you're not having happy times and quality time and enjoying one another again, because the day-to-day stress of just trying to get it all done is getting to be too much, and so it gets to be hard. And so recognizing those signs, sometimes we don't recognize that signs of stress are things like being forgetful, being irritable, fatigue, or not being able to sleep at all. Those types of things. The obvious ones are there, but it's the forgetfulness and kind of just, maybe your family says, you just seem grumpy, or you just don't seem like yourself. Those are some of your indicators for that. What are some of the other, yes? Oh, I gotta move over here, yes. So they can, so they can be better. Okay. Oh. Technology, right? So now I'm going to try to stay still, because I do like to move around a little bit. But I just think sometimes you just got to take a look at the real practical issues of it. Juggling multiple responsibilities. I know for me as a caregiver, I found myself in that sandwich generation. I got young kids, I got aging parents, I've got work, I've got church, I've got life, and trying to manage all of those things. Sometimes it gets to be challenging. And being able to make sure you do that and do that well, and get all the bases covered to do that. Arranging care takes a ton of work. If you're in the throes of it right now, you know you got to call a bunch of people, you got to meet them, you got to sign paperwork, you got to maybe introduce them to come into your house and help, schedule them. I have a colleague who is providing care for her mom, and just kind of scheduling caregivers while she's at work gets to be challenging. They call in sick. What do we do? How do I handle that? And so it gets to be quite a bit. Sometimes our family members' physical needs will really begin to exceed what we physically can do, or what one person physically can do in providing care. And so is it getting harder? Are they needing more help standing up or getting in and out of the shower? And is it physically demanding? And are you having to make sure you take care of your own body and your body mechanics for doing that? Some folks might be doing long distance caregiving. You may have your loved one who's living in California right now, and you're trying to manage that from afar. And that's really challenging if somebody's in their own home, because you got to make sure that you've got eyes on them routinely, that somebody's going in and out, and when it's not you. And that can be really hard to do, and find folks that you trust and that you know are going to check on them on a daily basis and doing that. And then those safety concerns that we've talked about. But it's not just about knowing how to get out in the event of an emergency, but are they getting confused? And are they still driving? Are they maybe going out for a walk and getting turned around and can't find their way back in the neighborhood? Are they falling a lot? And you're worried that if they fall, what will happen if no one's at home to find them or see them? And those types of things. And again, there's lots of resources you can put in play, like your alert buttons that call for help, that you can put in play. But at some point, we sort of exceed what those will be able to do for us while the person is still in their home. And so it becomes really important to kind of look at those. Financial and legal issues. Sometimes all that care and all those services you're bringing into the home, by the time you add it all up, you're paying twice, 3, 4 times as much as you would be paying if you looked at residential care. And so you have to kind of look at how does that happen and what are my financial resources in that. And the second thing is that who's making the decision? Sometimes I think it becomes hard if you have multiple family members, and sometimes in our families we don't always agree on the same course of action. And so maybe I think it's time and my brother doesn't think it's time, or vice versa. And how do you work through that? And who really is the decision maker? Who gets the opportunity to do that? Particularly if you're caring for a loved one who may not be able to participate in their decision making anymore. And so it comes down now to a family member or someone who's been designated. Yes.
There's a question on here that says live alert watches or bracelets.
Mm-hmm.
Do you recommend a particular model or organization?
I don't necessarily. Pardon?
Can you repeat the question?
Oh, I got to repeat the question. So the question is on like the live alert and the alerts that you can wear or watches. Do I recommend a particular model or a particular organization? I don't necessarily. I think they all work very similarly. I think you got to look at what your needs are and then what those ranges are. I mean, they have everything from home cameras that'll alert you if somebody's on the move to ones that can recognize if you've changed the landscape, which means if I'm here and then I'm down on the floor, it recognizes it. So maybe if I don't know how to push the button or I've fallen and I'm injured, it knows that I've changed planes. And so it's going to call for help. So I think you have to look at what those needs are and take a look at what works for that. Mm-hmm. Perfect. Great. So how do you decide on which care is right? And I've alluded to it a little bit, but I think sometimes if you are not in the healthcare world, if you haven't done this before, we sometimes think there's sort of just 2 options, home or not at home. And I like to make sure everybody is sort of aware that there's a whole spectrum of care that's in there that provides you with options. Home care, getting folks to come in your home and provide care. We talk a lot about home health. A lot of times that's not a long-term solution. Home health comes in for a short term. They've got a specific reason for being in there, whether that's physical therapy, occupational therapy, they meet that need and they're out. But there's also non-medical home care agencies. And their whole specific role is to come in and they can do housekeeping. They can do physical care, helping people take a bath, get dressed, things like that. They can do meal preparation. They can do transportation. And so there's a number of things that they can do that you can bring somebody in to help you in the home. A lot of times folks are unaware of or have a misconception about the concept of an adult day. We have the Best Friends Adult Day Center, and a lot of times when I meet families who are coming in to there, they didn't realize, one, that it existed, and they don't realize kind of the benefits to the loved one for it. An adult day has a whole host of benefits. One is that it gets your loved one out and they are around other people and they can have something to do and have a social life. And we know research tells us that folks who participate in an adult day are able to kind of push off placement in long-term care communities up to about 18 months to 2 years. And so a lot of times just putting that in place throughout the day, and then maybe you're home at night, or maybe you have in-home caregivers at night, can really put that together. And that's cost effective. Most adult days are about $10 an hour. It's a lot more expensive to hire somebody in the home, but that can help you get through a day if you want to keep working, things like that. But your loved one gets a ton of benefits, and they also get meals and snacks and a nurse who is going to be kind of checking on them, making sure they're okay, watching for little subtle changes, and communicating with the doctor. So to do that, 5 days a week is a pretty good opportunity to kind of keep folks healthy and strong. Respite care is another option. A lot of residential care communities offer respite care, which is where somebody can come in and stay for a week, 2 weeks, or a month at a time. If you want to go on a vacation, We at the home place at Midway, we have a family, and she has to have surgery, and she's going to have about 3 weeks of recovery time. So her husband's going to come stay with us for 4 weeks while she has surgery, so she just doesn't have to worry about it. And she can come visit. She can get her driver and come visit, but she doesn't have to worry about the physical nature of his care because she's not going to be able to do it because of her restrictions. So you can get that short-term respite care. That's also sometimes a good way to entry into residential care because it's short-term. We see how it goes. Sometimes we stay. Sometimes we go in for a respite stay and it works out so well, and we say, you know what, I think this is good, and our relationship's better, and I'm still involved and in care, and so they end up staying. And then in residential care is kind of that next level of care. In the state of Kentucky, there are 3 different levels of residential care. It can get a little confusing because we do tend to be unique. So if you're from any other state around us, they won't necessarily know. Our assisted living looks very different than assisted living in Indiana or Ohio. So in Kentucky, assisted living is a social model program. There are no medical services that are offered through assisted living. There are no nurses in assisted living. However, it's a great first start because it allows you to get assistance with getting dressed in the morning, all your activities of daily living, taking a shower, all your meals, all your housekeeping, and you can get medication reminders. So you're still going to have to set up those medications, but the staff can come in and say, don't forget, it's time for your morning medications, and remind them. And so it's really kind of that first step, and it's the most independent level of care while you can still get assistance in residential care. The next level of care is personal care, which is a very unique level of care to the state of Kentucky. And it's because it's a lot like assisted living, but we introduce the aspect of nursing into that. And so personal care communities, we have 2 of them, the home place at Midway and Bridgepoint. We have a nurse around the clock, just in case you need stuff, but also to give medications. But sometimes if somebody is a brittle diabetic, for example, and living at home or even living in assisted living because they can't do things like checking blood sugar and making an assessment and a determination about what to do if the blood sugar isn't where it needs to be. In personal care, you got a nurse there, and they're monitoring that, and they're keeping up with that and making sure that we can manage that blood sugar and keep it under control. So you get that extra additional piece. Still get all the help with taking a shower and a bath, all your meals, all your housekeeping, and then you get that extra added benefit of nursing services. Then you have your next level, which is your skilled nursing service, which is a little bit higher level nursing care than you have in personal care. And this is what you think of when you think of traditional nursing homes. So it's for folks who have kind of complex medical needs, who have a need for a higher level of nursing, a skilled nursing service to do that. And so those are kind of your options. And I think sometimes if you haven't been in the field, folks will think it's one or the other, and we go straight from home to nursing home, and there's all these steps in between. Yes, ma'am.
Where does memory care fall on that?
So memory care usually sits in the personal care arena because one of the things I find is a lot of times with memory care, they need that nurse to manage the medicines. Because in assisted living, if we're still just doing medication reminders, we still can get confused about that and get those messed up. Now, some folks can do okay, but as it progresses, it gets harder and harder to know how to flip up that medication, or even the ones that open for you. Why is this open? What is it doing? So memory care does tend to be in that personal care, because personal care requirements and regulations is that those folks are still self-mobile, which means they're ambulatory, walking around, or they can self-propel in a wheelchair or use a walker. But they're fairly still physically independent, don't have a high level of nursing need. And that's what we find a lot with our folks with dementia, is that they need more help with the activities of daily living, getting dressed, taking a shower, medicines. They don't really have a high level of medical need that you need from a skilled nursing. So memory care does tend to fall in that personal care. The other thing that I like about that is that it kind of stretches a little bit longer. And so I never like to make multiple moves for a person with dementia. It's just hard on that transition. And so That's a good place to start, and it will last for a while until you need skilled nursing. A lot of times if we get into assisted living, you're going to have to move after a little while because you're not going to be able to manage those medicines. Your dementia is going to get to a certain level. And so it's kind of nice just to start at that personal care level. That's just my thought. There is memory care in skilled nursing, and that can continue on and be provided. There are not very many skilled nursing communities in Kentucky that offer kind of specialized memory care units. There's a handful of them, but yeah, so that's something that you can look at and see. So it's time to think about it. You weigh in all the thoughts that you have, and what do we do and where do we go from here? And so in your Pathways book, I'm only going to hit a couple of highlights, but I want to tell you on page 76 and 77, it gives you a whole list of questions to ask. And one of the things that I think is the most important is to shop around. Look around at assisted living and personal care. Look around at the adult day centers. Talk to a couple different home care agencies. Visit a couple nursing homes and see what you think and how you feel. And sometimes it's not the shiniest, newest place. Sometimes it really comes down to, does it feel like home? And I think home feels like that because of the people that are there and the staff. And so you really want to take a look at what kinds of stuff are they doing? Is there going to be fun stuff for my loved one to do? Are they going to enjoy their time here? What do those activities look like? And then what's the staff like? Is it warm? Is it welcoming? Is it feel like home? What's the philosophy for that? And then what kind of training do they receive? Particularly if it's memory care, you want to make sure that they've had some specialized level of training in order to be able to do that and do it well for that. And then what's included in the cost? And that's one of the big things to think about. A lot of times there'd be a base price, but sometimes there'll be additional costs. You want to make sure you understand what all is included in this cost and for this fee, and understanding your resources and things like that. And then as you're thinking about it, one of the best things to do is go for a meal or go for an activity or go for an event. A lot of places offer community level events, or they'll have musicians come in and do an activity, or you can just go for a meal and see how it goes and see how it feels, but bring your loved one with you and see and see how they begin to feel about being there to do that. When you get ready to make the transition, it's important to understand that I think sometimes in life, if you get your head around what you're facing, it gets a little bit easier to do. It's not an easy transition. Even if everybody's in agreement, even if your loved one says, I think it's time for me to move to assisted living, it's still a transition. It's just like any of us. Anytime we change aspects of our life, it's hard. A couple things that your loved one might experience is anxiety. The older I get, the more I find it hard to learn new things, find new things. And so you're kind of uprooting and getting a whole new physical environment. And that's disconcerting at first. And so you can have some anxiety. And the other piece is, who will I know anybody? Who will I sit with at lunch or dinner? Those questions don't go away as we get older. How do I do this? There's a lot of questions with that. And so you want to work through that, and hopefully whatever care service you're using, they help your loved one work through that. And they walk them through that initial transition. I think there's a huge sense of loss for our loved ones. Leaving our home is never easy. And so recognizing that and doing things that we can to maybe bring some aspects of home there so we still haven't said all of it, left it all behind. And so whether that's a favorite quilt, pictures, trinkets, things like that, where you can actually set up the space so that you've got aspects of home to bring that. Getting confused, finding my way around, which way to go, and remembering how to do that and having that. But I also think I wanted to not focus on just the hard parts of the transition, but I do think one of the things we find is that some folks get really isolated if they're having an illness or having difficulties. And so when you get into residential care, it's really an opportunity to get back into finding friends again and being social and having activities that maybe they haven't been able to do for a while because they have been homebound or they haven't been able to get out on their own. And then you begin to see a more improved health because you're going to have nurses watching over, you're going to have folks checking and staying in touch with the physicians and really making sure our nutritional needs are met, things like that. If you're the primary caregiver or you're supporting the primary caregiver, I think it's important to understand what you might experience. I think it's normal to experience a whole host of anxiety. What's this going to be like? How's it going to go? How are they going to do? I hope they're doing okay after the first time that you spend the night away and you're wondering. And talk through that with wherever you are. And folks take really good care of your loved ones, but it's not like home. And it takes a while for the staff and the team to learn those little things about your loved one that you know already. That they like 2 creams in their coffee, that they almost like it more pale than they do coffee. It takes a little while to learn those little things. The staff will get there, but sometimes you have to be patient, and that's going to make you'll feel a little anxious when that process is going. Just to say, are we going to get this? Is it going to be right? Because nobody takes care of the people we love as well as we do. And that's an important thing that we'll struggle with. I think a lot of folks, there's a sense of grief and a sense of loss. Making that move and making that change is an acceptance that things are different. Things are changing. Things aren't the way they used to be. Things aren't going to be the way they used to be. And so we have to process through that change in life and that feeling of grief. Sometimes, and I would say more oftentimes than not, there's a feeling of guilt. Maybe we've made a promise that we would never, ever move somebody. And that's a hard promise to keep. Because sometimes it takes a staff of people 24 hours a day to provide care. And no one of us can do that as an individual. And so sometimes we have guilt because maybe we're going back on a promise that we feel like we've made. Sometimes we feel like we should have been able to do it longer. Or if I'd only just tried that. And we're our own worst critic, right? And we feel like we should do that. And so you'll have those feelings of guilt. And I encourage you to kind of talk about those and work through those. There's many, many people that have walked that journey and made that decision and done that and processed through it. And sometimes when you get to the other side of it, you actually see that your family member's better off and doing well, and you're having more quality time together and you're enjoying one another again. And you're relaxed, you're more relaxed. And so that helps with some of those guilt feelings. I think one thing you'll find is that you'll get a new support system. So that's one of the, sometimes if you're doing it on your own at home, you might have your immediate family, but you don't have folks or your friends, but they maybe don't totally understand it. You'll meet other family members, you'll meet other folks, and you get kind of a new support system. But also the professionals that work and operate in these communities have been doing it for a long time, and they really can help you work through these feelings and work through the anxiety and the concerns. And so you really get that additional support to help you with that. You've got a ton of resources at your disposal as you get ready to make these decisions and think about them. One is support groups. There are online support groups. There are in-person support groups. It just depends on kind of what you prefer. And sometimes getting out's hard, so the online support groups work really, really well. I think it's really helpful to talk to somebody else who's going through real similar things. Our friends are always supportive and loving, and our family can do that, but sometimes they just don't know. And so it's nice to talk to somebody else who might have done that. There are folks who are geriatric care managers. They do nothing but help families navigate this whole system of care. From figuring out, do I need home care, to do I adapt my house, to how do I find a long-term care community, to what's out there. And so they can really help you do that. There are attorneys that specialize very specifically in elder law. As you do this with your family, we very, very much so encourage that you go to an elder law attorney. It's a very complicated area in regards to decision making, in regards to finances, and all the decisions that have to get made. And you need to make sure that you have somebody who knows that area of law very, very well, because if it messes up, then it's really hard to fix and undo. The nursing home ombudsman. A lot of people don't know who this person is. But they do not work for any particular nursing home. They are, receive their funding through the state. They're an independent body. And so they're going to be able to help support you in the process as you're looking for a long-term care community. And they're not biased. So they're not going to pick a place just because they know it, or just because maybe they're going to get something in return from that location. And I love an unbiased view because they're going to figure out what's best for you. And what's best for me and what's best for you and each other isn't always the same thing. And so we want to make sure we look at that. And so the nursing home ombudsman really is unbiased in that way. If you have connected, the Alzheimer's Association is an amazing resource if you are dealing with Alzheimer's or dementia and caring for your loved one. They have a 24-hour helpline. They offer educational programs as well as support groups. So they're a whole big resource, and their website is full of information to do. And then, of course, you all are here because you get a good resource from UK and all of the things that they have on their website and the things that they can provide to kind of help you make those decisions. So I wanted to leave a few minutes for questions. I know we had a couple in between, but are there other questions that folks have? Yes, sir.
You made an assumption there at one point in saying that when the elder person agrees that they need to move, what if they putting up a castle and a moat around themselves to the point of just daring you to do anything?
So, yes, I did. And the reason is in my experience, I have had a handful of folks that it was their decision. They actually took the steps. Didn't mean it was an easy decision, but they actually took the steps on their own to make that. I'm going to tell you the vast majority of the time, folks are going to dig their heels in. It's a hard transition. They don't want to do it. Part of that is where an elder law attorney comes into play. Part of that is looking at whether or not they're still competent to make their own decisions. And that's hard to do, to stand by when somebody that we love isn't making good decisions, but they're still competent. But if you're dealing with Alzheimer's disease and dementia, sometimes we have to get decision-making authority, and we have to get them into a place that they're safe, and sometimes that's hard and challenging. What I would tell you is we do that all the time and talk families through that process and try to ease it. And part of that is, let's go visit. Let's go have a lunch. Let's go see what it's like. Let's just see if we can get more acclimated and used to it. Some folks are still going to be resistant, and it's working through that process. So, does that answer your question?
Sort of.
You got a moat and a castle that you're trying to work through?
Yeah, it's, and also if you're dealing with even recognizing their doctor saying that you need to look at that, and then you start not telling them their own health issues. So there's just all that kind of barrier because they don't want you to go through that process. So
they begin to kind of hide some stuff so that you're not seeing it because, you'll know that. I think all of us might find ourselves doing that because I don't know, but personally in my own life, I'll say, I got it, I'm fine. And I might not be, but I don't really want anybody else to kind of come in. Sometimes I think one of the things that's helpful in that instance, and it's not a perfect solution, but sometimes it's the doctor just wants you to try it. Let's try it. We don't have to say this is forever. We don't have to say we're leaving this behind, that kind of thing. Let's give it a try. Let's just try it. And that's what the doctor wants you to do. He wants you to try it for a couple weeks. Let's see. Let's get back on our feet. Let's get some physical therapy. Whatever that might be, but let's give it a try. And sometimes if folks will do that if they know it's maybe a temporary solution, even though maybe we know that it's likely going to turn into something that's not temporary, it's a whole lot easier pill to swallow to think I'm not leaving my whole house behind right now. And then maybe once I get in there and I try it, it's not as bad as I think, things are going as well, and I have an easier time accepting it. It's not going to be simple, but I have an easier time accepting it. So it's one thing to try, but it is very challenging. Bunches of hands.
What about when you start noticing unsafe behavior? And it is, they're going to go out and walk through town with no coat and cold weather. So what do you, and physically prevent you from stopping them?
So the question was, what happens if you start to notice unsafe behaviors? They're gonna go out walking all over town and polar vortex, right?
Try to stop them and say, hey, this isn't, and yeah, whoa.
And they're not gonna have being stopped and that kind of stuff. I think part of that, sometimes if you're working with somebody who has dementia, it's a whole nother challenge, because they are, they're not gonna wanna be told, I can't do that. And to what I said a little bit earlier, I think if I've got my mindset, you ask my family, ask my husband, I'm gonna do it. Don't tell me I can't. And so I think sometimes for folks with dementia, I'm fine, I got it, I'm gonna do it. And so, we use, at Best Friends Day Center, we use the Best Friends approach. And a lot of times it's really kind of taken a whole different approach, which is not saying, don't do this, but saying, hang on, let's get our code, or how about we go walk over here, or we come up with some alternative solutions to really begin to structure that day and head in the direction we want to be in. Instead of fighting continually, I don't want you to be doing this, let me put in front of us something that does do that. Still not going to fix everything, but it can be helpful in trying to have a kind of that different approach, because it's hard if you're arguing or you're kind of pushing back. And so, that's where the approach kind of just says, let's just kind of see if we can find something different and go with it, and see. And sometimes if we just go with it, when we get out in that cold, and we watch them and keep them safe and give them a little bit of independence and freedom, we do that. Yeah, go ahead.
I've just got a situation where I've got a family, two failing parents, both at the same time. So I had my father that was too sick to leave, my mother that was fighting him to leave, to go out the door, slamming the cane. I mean, it was really, I called the police. I was like, hey, I need help here, because I can't, and I wanted it to be documented. I wanted them to know if they saw this woman walking through town with a cane and no coat, they knew where she belonged, where it was. Yeah.
So having that situation, I think you did the best you could do. It's just like all of us, we do the best we can do with what we've got. But the big part, what I would say is, that's going back to my first set of slides of when is it time. It may be time for a secure environment if she's got memory care. And secure environment does not mean a prison or 4 walls. Bridgepoint and Home Place, we have a secure environment, but there's free access to the outdoors. It's just the outdoors they're going to is going to be safe and secure. They're not going to be down on Main Street, because it's a beautiful courtyard. It's a place to move, and it gives that sense of freedom. I think when we take that away and we take away that sense of control and that independence, they want that. So that's probably one of your indicators, and the fact that your other parent, your dad, physically can't do it anymore. So you've got your check marks. It's just hard to come to that final decision of doing it. Yes.
I have a question on Zoom. Are there organizations that individuals can request reports, such as rankings, prior shortcomings, or issues of care facilities they are considering?
So yes, there is. So the biggest one, not all levels of care have it, but Nursing Home Compare, which is run by the government, Nursing Home Compare is where you can pull up all skilled nursing facilities and you can see their star ratings. You can also see the last time they were inspected, what was found, and what they did to correct that, those types of things. In Kentucky, with assisted living, because we have a different licensure level, if you go to Kentucky's website, kentucky.gov, and you search in assisted living, on the site, the Department for Aging and Independent Living, which oversees assisted living, they have that on the assisted living communities in Kentucky. So that's just Kentucky. So I don't know that there's assisted living outside of Kentucky to look at that way, but I do know in Kentucky you can look at those things. So Nursing Home Compare is going to give you your skilled nursing facilities, and then the Kentucky website, you can take a look at your assisted livings that way. Adult days, home care, there really isn't any place to look there. What I would encourage you to do is, for better or worse, we're stuck with it. Online, we have folks can give ratings, and nowadays as consumers, you can take a look at what are the ratings? Are they 5-star? Are they 4-star? Because most places do have a website. Most places have a Facebook page where folks are doing feedback and ratings for that. So that's one way you could look at it. There's not a formal place and it's not organized that way, but that's the only other option for that one. Yes, ma'am.
My mom's living at home with me, but she's ambulating. It's getting more and more difficult, and there'll be a point when she's bedbound probably. So what kind of time frame does it take to get from the home setting into that long-term care where you're doing the financials and stuff? Are you talking, does it take a month? Sometimes does it take a week? I mean, I think as a nurse at the hospital, I see people wait too long, and they come in crisis.
So the question was, having a family member at home, what is the time frame to make a decision from home to long-term care? And that sometimes people do. So our system is not set up to work in crisis, and it's not set up to work quickly. And so that's probably one of the biggest pieces of advice I'm going to tell you. When we have to make decisions fast and quick, they end up not being where we want them to be, and we end up having to take whatever is available. So I really encourage planning that. Couple things. In the assisted living and personal care realm, most of those places, that can be fairly quick. In personal care, it does require that you get see your physician within 14 days of move-in. So sometimes that can be your lag to get in. But oftentimes, as long as they have a room or an apartment that's open, you can make that one happen a little quicker. In long-term care, it's a little bit more challenging. And particularly because long-term care is only paid for in one of really two ways, and that's through Medicaid or private pay. And there are not enough Medicaid beds in the state of Kentucky, and most places who have Medicaid beds have a very long waiting list. So if you think you're going to need it, I would strongly suggest getting on the waiting list. Most places you can say, no, we're not ready, and they can call you back, but then you're already on that list. You don't want to start at the bottom when you're ready, because that'll be particularly more challenging, and you begin to plan for that. So.
As a private pay, do you get in a little faster?
It just depends. For the home place at Midway is a dual certified. We have private pay, Medicare, and Medicaid, and we take a waiting list, and we do not ask what your payer source is, so that there's no that doesn't even come into play for us. It's where are you on the list, and we're gonna call you when we have a room available, and so that makes that. Now there are 100% private pay long-term care beds. They're not certified at all for Medicaid or Medicare. You pay privately 100% ongoing there, and there are more of those. So they're more open and less restricted. So that can be one place to go to.
But Medicare doesn't cover any lodging or anything like that, does it?
Medicare does not cover long-term care. They will cover short rehabilitation stays up to 100 days, but after 21 days, you're going to have a copay associated with that. But it is only to do rehabilitation or for a skilled nursing, and you have goals when you go in, and as long as you're moving towards those goals, Medicare keeps paying. But if you plateau, then Medicare gives you 48 hours and says, done.
What about respite care and Medicare?
No. Medicare really is for that short stay, goal-oriented. We're trying to rehab or get like a wound taken care of or things like that. And that's it.
Can you give us your final comment, and then we'll take it?
I think my final comment would be just as we brought up here, planning is key. And sometimes I think we see it coming, but the natural part of us is maybe to just back off. Oh, we're not there yet. We're not there yet. Our system is not designed to do anything really quickly, and there's a lot of things that kind of need to come in play. Whether it's getting decision-making authority, getting your finances in order, or getting on a waiting list. If you wait too long, sometimes it gets to be challenging. So you've got your markers to know when is the time to do it, but there's a lot of steps you need to take